Besides the billions of dollars of weapons the US and its allies have already supplied to Ukraine, the Kiev regime has been repeatedly clamoring for fighter jets, specifically the US-made F-16s, to replace the dwindling fleet of Soviet-era MiG-29 and Su-27 fighters. US-made F-16s have topped Kiev's wish list since the start of the Ukraine crisis, but the fourth-generation planes have no business in a modern-day battlefield, a US Air Force veteran was cited as saying in a media report. Lacking any stealth features, fighter jets such as the F-16 would be completely outmatched in high-threat environments, John Venable, a former pilot, clarified. Russia's advanced air defense, with its S-400 anti-aircraft missile systems, would easily outmaneuver the F-16's targeting systems, Venable argued. Furthermore, the S-400s would be able to target the fighter jets well before they position themselves to fire their load of around 8 SDBs, small-diameter bomb, the senior research fellow for defense policy at the Heritage Foundation think tank added. Giving Ukraine more MiG-29s will not help the battlefield. And even if we gave them modern F-16s, I would say more modern F-16s, it's not going to change or influence the battlefield in a year, much less in time for a spring offensive, he was quoted as saying, referring to the much heralded Ukrainian counteroffensive. The US veteran reminisced about his days as an F-16 pilot in the 80s and 90s, arguing that at the time, his jets stood a fighting chance against SA-6 and SA-11 Soviet-era surface-to-air missile (SAM) systems, especially when he was supported by HARM, high-speed anti-radiation missile, targeting systems. There would have been a good possibility that I would have been shot down, but also at least an equal possibility that I could have made it to the target, Venable said, pointing out that since then, there had been what he referred to as a whole leap in capabilities. I had a fighting chance back then. Today, there is no fighting chance for the F-16s, he added. Other Western aviation analysts have echoed these assessments of F-16s, saying that if Kiev were ever to get them, they might not last very long. It has been pointed out that General Dynamics multi-role fighter aircraft needs specially prepared airbases and airstrips, something Ukraine lacks, with the country's airfields too short and austere to allow for safe use of fully loaded F-16s. Back in January, the Pentagon's deputy press secretary, Sabrina Singh, was cited as saying that F-16s would be another challenging system that would require training so that Ukraine's pilots could become proficient enough for using the planes in combat. In any case, so far the issue of sending American F-16s to the Kiev regime has been off the table, with only NATO members Poland and Slovakia pledging some older MiG-29s with which Ukrainian pilots and mechanics are familiar. Speaking to an American broadcaster on 24 February 2023, US President Joe Biden said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky doesn't need F-16s now, adding that there is no basis upon which there is a rationale for doing this. On 3 May, Yuri Ignat, official representative of Ukraine's Air Force, admitted that Western countries were reluctant, as yet, to deliver F-16s to Kiev. He added that some NATO member states have been on a waiting list to get such US fighter jets for years. Russia has repeatedly warned that the military aid the US and its allies are continuing to deliver to Kiev only prolongs the Ukrainian conflict. The Russian Foreign Ministry emphasized that NATO countries are playing with fire by supplying weapons to Kiev and that any convoy of arms for Ukraine will become a legitimate target for Russian forces. Russian S-400, known as SA-21 Growler among NATO nations, considered the most advanced SAM system in the world, designed to engage targets at ranges of up to 400 kilometers in an intensive jamming environment. The S-400 system can track many stealth targets with high modularity and high mobility, ensuring the system can be deployed and engage targets within minutes. It is lethal against non-stealth fighters. This has forced the Ukrainian pilots to fly their fourth-generation warplanes outside the S-400's effective range, or to fly at low altitudes until they come up to acquire and hit targets they can find before diving back into low altitude. Countering S-400 has been the primary focus for NATO countries. The US has provided high-speed anti-radiation missiles, HARMs, to counter the long-range missiles. To be effective, the HARMs must be launched from within the missile's maximum range and at radars that are actively emitting. With no onboard system that can determine the SAM's location or detect its emissions, hitting an S-400 or any other radar with a US $200,000 HARM launched from a MiG-29 or Su-27 is little more than blind luck. Cad's Venable. The F-35 is the only system that can find, fix, and destroy the S-400, and it costs millions less to acquire and 10% less to sustain than the fourth-generation F-15EX, a fighter that would be no more effective in Ukraine than the MiG-29s or Su-27s currently operating there, he said. While the US hesitates to give F-16s to Ukraine, the scenario of the US providing its latest F-35s to Ukraine is not entertaining. It is highly unlikely that the US will provide Ukraine with any fighter jets, neither F-16s nor F-35s, as there is no time to provide adequate training to the Ukrainian pilots. Also, it will then be a full-fledged war, said Air Vice Marshal Anil Gilani, who retired from the Indian Air Force and has flown Jaguar ground attack aircraft. He is presently the Additional Director General of the Center of Air Power Studies in New Delhi. So far, the US Air Force has deployed F-35 stealth fighters to NATO's eastern edge. The Utah-based 388th and 419th Fighter Wings planes were sent to absorb data from the Russian surface-to-air missiles to understand the threat landscape better and build its database for future conflicts. Both the sides, NATO and Russia, are prolonging the war. Russia, at the beginning of the war, did not fully suppress the air power of Ukraine. Ukraine has also shown the use of some innovative ways to counter Russia. Even now, they need to develop tactics to defeat S-400s, Gilani added. Despite the expert opinion to the contrary, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been vigorously seeking fighter jets. The war-torn country has been requesting fighters for a long time. If the war in Ukraine teaches us just one thing about air power, it's that fourth-generation platforms have no place on the modern battlefield. Providing Ukraine with F-16s is laudable, but it would be a costly mistake.